Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Whispers of the Deep. My name is Draken. Today we are going over Chapter 20, Ekkin 6. It's been a while, and just like all the other chapters, we have a lot of things to get through. But anyways, over the past several months, I've written four more chapters, and these are some of my favorite chapters. And I say that about a bunch of my chapters, but here we are. So, to give a brief refresher, Ekkin 5 is the end of the Green Navria arc, where Ekkin helped open the gates of Green Navria, broke the siege, and then discovered that one of his teammates in this incursion was this man who turns out to be called Isolon, one of the, if not the last member of a different branch of the royal family from a previous dynasty. But that's beside the point. Isolon isn't in this chapter. Instead, we find ourselves in this chapter in the day before the Martial Games in the city of New Elon, spelled Ilon, at the western edge of the Empire Noria. So, as always, we will begin with the epigraph. Had the gods graced him with another dream, the son of Heva might have lived a life like many others. Instead, by their design, Melanthios awoke with a vision, even if he only sought out its meaning at the behest of Yulia, his adoptive sister and future consort. That vision led him deep under the earth, where Melanthios found his epiphany, and the sword's judgment and soundless song through which he would make it manifest. So this passage of Norian history tells us more about the foundations of the empire. So we learned that Melanthios has a sister slash wife named Yulia, his adoptive sister and future consort, and then his mother, Heva. Melanthios has some kind of dream and then is spurred by his sister to go into a cave. And in this cave, he finds the two swords, Soundless Song and Judgment. Soundless Song and Judgment, as at our current point in the story, are unaccounted for, and we know that both of them were lost in one way or another. Similarly, we open finding Ekkin lost. The hall was a maze for which Ekkin had no thread. This, of course, is a reference to the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, where Theseus is able to navigate the labyrinth at the palace of Knossos by using a thread provided by Ariadne. Ekkin, however, has no thread and has no Ariadne. Not truly. But we find that it is made of brick and stone, and he has gotten lost before. He's trying not to be lost because he has been summoned by the Empress. And in a sort of Campbell monomyth sense, this is the meeting with the goddess, which follows the first encounter with death. But actually, Ekkin is hardly at that stage yet. This is yet another trial, and you really get that. Ekkin is haunted in this chapter. Ekkin is always haunted by the whispers of forces unseen, but now they especially whisper at him, saying, "Why'd you even bother? She asked for the Hellstrom heirs, but said you were sitting a scared little boy who can't even find his way." Ekkin, as always, is his neurotic self who is, you know, Ekkin really is an awful person, which is why he's so much fun to write about. And here we learn that they've been staying, they departed Green Navia 24 days ago, and he has been dining with the Kertari, Erga. And the position of Erga in Ekkin's inner circle is something of debate. She is sitting with Ekkin and his lieutenants, yet is not one of his lieutenants. And there is a there's a the room close to his in the labyrinthine palace of New Elon. And however, his lieutenants had asked a few questions, each for their own reasons. His men had asked none. It was clear enough to them, even though they thought wrongly. People in this chapter, we very quickly learned that people think Erga is Ekkin's side piece, his concubine, something like that. One second. Back. So, where was I? Yes, Erga. Essentially, it is a question of what is Erga's relationship to Ekkin? Why did Ekkin save her? These are questions that are whirling around in Ekkin's head, and he doesn't know the answer, though. But we get the idea that he wants Erga to be something more than a confidant. But that is not the case. Erga is her own person. She's not interested in Ekkin, and Ekkin, based off of the events of Ekkin 5, is very clearly interested in Erga, even if he's not able to puzzle it out then. Ekkin grit his teeth only, but the frustration had to wait. Before him was the maze of New Elon's palace. Again, this is the Palace of Knossos, this is Minos' labyrinth, built in around the city spire jutting from a bluff in the city's southern district, and how he hated it. So we have two separate parallels here. Explicitly, the Palace of New Elon and Mount Viridian are paralleled. However, New Elon's palace and its winding maze of corridors is also paralleled to another palace with a winding maze of corridors set against a spire, which is the Palace of Origins Hall at Fair Calais. This can represent some kind of similar architectural or cultural history between the two, most likely because, New Elon is founded as a colony of the Empire Noria. So, whereas his home balanced sky and stone, Ekkin is biased towards what he knows. New Elon's house was an anthill built to human size, and Ekkin is a coward. He doesn't try out new things, and he is pathless. And then Ekkin overhears a voice, and this voice is Valerius. Valerius and some representative of Lord Nox are haggling over the price of a suit of armor, and it is not just any normal suit of armor, it is this armor that is elaborate, is ancient, beautiful with a skeletal ribbing and a beaked helmet resembling a raptor's skull. This might become important later, but we'll see. But this conversation is ultimately a conversation about Ekkin. Why is Valerius buying this armor behind Ekkin's back? Why is he not using Ekkin's money to buy it? And who is Erga to Ekkin? These are all questions are being asked of Valerius, Ekkin's representative. And yet, these are questions that Ekkin himself realistically is not able to answer. Who is she? A friend. I cannot go with him about the money. I would simply cannot. There's something. Valerius is very clearly hiding something, and we don't really know why he needs this suit in particular. There might be something about it, or it might be because he's been requested to get this suit. 3 nights ago was the White's new moon, the white moon as opposed to the red moon, and here we get more confirmation about the actual nature of the martial games. The martial games very much being inspired by the Olympic Games of history, have been the talk of the men since their depart. Melee, mounted duels, javelin throw, archery, the wheel, the dreaded all form, each eyed their preferred event. So here we learn what are some of the normal events you see. There is a melee where everyone fights in a free-for-all. There are mounted duels where it's essentially kind of like jousting. There is javelin throw. There's archery. There's the wheel. What the wheel is, that's a good question. It might be some kind of weightlifting competition where you pick up wheels of metal, or it might be like the Wheel of Pain, where you act as the animal in a rotary mill of some kind and see how much added weight you can push. And then there's also the dreaded all form. All form, this is actually a reference to the ancient Olympic sport of pankration, which is essentially a wrestling match where there are no rules except for two. And if I remember what those two rules are, is because as a wrestling match, you're supposed to put the other person to submission, but the two rules of the wrestling are no biting and no gouging out the eyes, if I remember correctly. Anything else goes, hence the term all form. And then we also learned that now the death of Uther Otho is public information. Tycho Otho had learned of it as early as before Ekkin 2, but here now is public information for Ekkin's plotline. Martial games instead be small, even the prizes remained momentous. Gold, knighthood granted by Tycho Otho himself, lordship, and a wish. So there's only 4 events, and later we'll learn that 2 of these events at the very least are the melee and mounted duels. So specifically on the issue of knighthood, knighthood seems to be just some rank in the feudal order. However, being granted by Tycho Otho, it seems that you can only be knighted by someone of higher feudal station than you. A lordship complete with its lands and incomes, this is more significant than a lordship, which would have no lands and incomes attached and is just a title. There's also the idea that we don't know what the lands or incomes are, and therefore therefore it might not even be public knowledge whatever fief the winner of said competition would be. And if Valerius is trying to get armor for someone to win one of these competitions, we might wonder which one of these competitions fits it most and what they want from it. Why them out to do it, why wouldn't Valerius have told me, and besides he's the already heirs to his father's castle. Here we get the confirmed in fact that the lordship is the prize for the mounted duels, and Valerius is not here to buy for himself. If we win, he's sponsoring someone else, as Ekkin would have sponsored him had Valerius competed himself. And he said, the man yells, "Is it true that being a rich man, my master's purveyor finds many wondrous?" This is a riff on an ancient Greek construction where many and blank. If I have a library of many good books, I have a library of books many and good. I can make out the fabula, a pin used to affix cloth on the man's shoulder, bronze and wrought in the shape of bundled wheat. One of Scytheth's men, with the Scytheths having the sort of bronze and gold motif of wheat. And then here you get the description of the armor again. Which raptor's skull? It could be a hawk, it could be an eagle, it could be a vulture. We don't know. And coin is cheap to Lord Scytheth. The rich man wants for little, except for more money. So tell me what else you're willing to offer, because why would you offer gold to a rich man when there are things more valuable to gold to the rich man than gold? And Ekkin wants to hear on. Ekkin is playing the role of the spy, but he has to escape. And yet how he wondered. He expected, and he could not afford to be late. But this is weighing on Ekkin's mind, and we'll get more on that later. Eventually, however, he found up one quarter down another. Ekkin is in a different, essentially outside space and time at this point. We're in this little pocket dimension, more or less. Things are going to play differently in this realm. And marking that, we have a black and white door, checkered, and flanked by two priestly lectorials. This begins this entrance into this figurative other reality where the rest of this chapter is going to take place, where the rules of reality are slightly different. And first, we have checkered black and white. Now, when we think of checkered black and white, we can think of races, but we also think of a chessboard. And in fact, this chapter has a lot to do with chess. So Ekkin is effectively entering upon a chessboard as a piece, and guarding it are two priestly lictorials. So we know the lictorial guard are this universe's version of the Praetorian Guard, the royal guard of the emperor. However, with priestly lictorials is part of this idea that some of the lictorials are officially sanctioned clerics. And this might be because it's a higher rank thing, or it might be because there is superstition about having your guards be priests, or if there are a certain number of priests in a room, death cannot enter. And most notably, we hear that in Ekkin 2, where 10 priestly lictorials guard the chambers of the emperor because it is believed that Gemcheek Sortira cannot enter if there are 10 priests guarding the door. They say, "Sir Ekkin Houster, we've been expecting you amid whatever time of day it is to you too. Ekkin, we are outside of time and space. We don't really know where we are, and Ekkin really doesn't know where he is. I'm here to see the Empress." And they cross their spears. It's very cinematic. And we see that they're wielding sword staves, which are staves with blades on top, sort of sword spear kind of thing. He says, "Your blade, if it please you." Ekkin is being neurotic yet again. And then here we have the sort of jump scare where Sighing Ekkin unbuckled Fortune and thrust it into one of the guards' waiting palms. He takes off the sword and hands it to them, but it's written to sound like he's about to stab them because Ekkin feels like stabbing someone. It was not enough. If I did turn dirt the skin, Ekkin scowls as they search his body for blades that were not there. This could mean that Ekkin has no other blades on his person, but this also is an emasculation joke. That Ekkin not only has no other blades, he has no other blades. And Ekkin gives a really heavy-hearted threat of, "I will kill your entire family if I have to be searched before entering the Empress's presence. Ekkin really doesn't have his priorities straight. And when they were satisfied, the two finally let Ekkin pass into the Empress's chambers. The first thing Ekkin noticed was the smell. And here now we are in the chamber of the goddess. Cloves, lemon, brick, leather, sunlight. Sunlight has no smell, but this is probably the smell of the warmth in the room. It was a solar, get it? Solar, and he its only guest. He's in the court of the gods, which mirrors the prologue. On its walls is a baldachin draped archway to the courtyard beyond. This is interesting. A baldachin is the sort of the fabric that hangs above a monarch's chair or a monarch's throne in a throne room, or like over the bed of a monarch or some kind of like this. It's a ceremonial thing, and the idea is that this is an archway to something divine, and it's leading out onto the sun. If we're looking at that from that direction, the alternate direction is we're looking in from the courtyard, and the baldachin drapes the archway, and and the entire room is the throne of Procneadon, because where does she not sit on a throne? Her room is her throne. Incense wafted from silver braziers about the room, cardamom, sandalwood, things Ekkin couldn't even recognize. Ekkin feels self-conscious. He feels like an imposter. And then here we get more, if read more explicitly, he's in the chambers of a god, and he doesn't know which. It could be Devitia, the harvest deity. It could be Adone, the goddess of erotic love. It could be Hiemet, the goddess of winter, or it could be one of the moon and one of the evil deities. Ever generous Myri. Myri is a goddess of decay. Vitria is a goddess of punishment. But he actually says this is the Garden of Earthly Delights, where Labyrinth Weaver Phaestura lured the unawares only to trap them in her web. So here we get this. Here we actually get mentioned Phaestura again, the Labyrinth Weaver, who is mentioned in the epigraph of the prologue, the first chapter. And Phaestura is a spider goddess of lies and seduction and secrets. And the Garden of Earthly Delights, however, is actually a reference to a Bosch painting, which, is meant to depict hell. So Phaestura is this great seducer. Among the evil deities, she's the great seducer. She's the one who lures in with earthly delights and then ensnares her victims. And if we are comparing, if we were comparing Phaestura, explicitly calling this Tekken's mind, in this metaphor, Phaestura very much is Procne So therefore, we want to think about what kind of earthly delights Procne is going to try and seduce Ekkin with. Indeed, was Phaestira's garden. Ekkin thought he wandered the room, for littering its shelves were curiosities from the deep places of the world. And deep is the Latin altus, meaning deep, like in the ocean deep, but also generally far away. But also we get the idea with the word deep that this is things which are being taken out of the earth. And here is a something I include a lot in my writing, which is characters in a room, and the shelves are littered with all these strange curiosities, and each one of them might mean something important. So we have dragon eggs, those metal ceramic looking things that sort of shimmer in the air. We have a tragedy mask stained with dried blood. This is a reference to, well, um, let's just say sometimes it's not a tragedy mask, sometimes it's a comedy mask. Glazed pots detailing the lives and deeds of Navrian heroes. These are just art. Ancient scrolls and manuscripts. We'll get to those later. A carved idol that I can expect to find warm to the touch if he had touched it. Generally, the only types of like stonewares or things like that which feel warm to the touch are either gemstones, which have a very easy time absorbing heat, or stones which naturally feel warm because they're radioactive, so -1 HP, -1 HP, -1 HP. A dagger, dark as night and sharp as sin, a dagger made of obsidian or some other material, a chain of golden thorns glinting even in shadow. The association of gold thorns and royalty might make you think of the Christian deity. However, this is actually more of a Mayan thing, where the Mayan kings would thread thorns through their tongues as a way of bloodletting and offering the blood to protect their people. So this idea that this is some kind of or sacrificial instrument, which is now being displayed as a trophy or curiosity. And then here we have an iron diadem, its fang-like barbs meant to pierce the skull of its wearer. We'll get back to this iron crown later, much, much later, not in this chapter. And then Ekkin came face to face with himself. Ekkin has been examining this world of the gods, him as an interloper, and now here we really narrow in on this idea of Ekkin's imposter syndrome. It was a mirror. In this world of magical artifacts, one of the strangest magical artifacts, or magical artifacts, is a modern mirror. Just, just a modern mirror, just a giant modern mirror, which perfectly reflects the world. And in it, Ekkin sees an ugly man. Balding scalp, buck teeth, coarse skin, eyes that are both too wide and too small. These are very clearly Ekkin's insecurities about himself. We have in previous chapters idea that Ekkin considers himself not conventionally attractive, but would have some kind of rustic charm. But here that gets stripped away, and Ekkin's like, "Damn, I'm ugly." Ekkin ran a hand through what remained of his hair. He paused and slowly began reaching towards the impossibly smooth mirror. And as what happens when you touch a perfect mirror? Well, you would probably hope that your hand doesn't come out and grab you, and it might. Curious, is it not? Ekkin spins around. Behind him was the Empress, like a vengeful spirit standing at her shoulder was a knight. So, um, uh, yes, we have the joke of standing behind her is the knight, as it's her guardian. I should have also mentioned where she came from. So, building on this whole dichotomy of Ekkin feeling like interloper, one of its walls was a baldaquined draped archway to a courtyard beyond. The other was a door. Just grandeur, mystique, royalty, a door. But also now we also know where Procne came from, and Ekkin did not notice because he was not paying attention. But Ekkin knows who the knight is. It's Durakos the Grey, one of the Holy Blades, and his blade was Sapience, the storied sword which had slain the God King of Garax. Where Garax is, probably in the east. The eastern gate of the Empire Noria is called Sarax, so they're probably from a similar cultural group. Closing in on 70, Sir Durakos was nevertheless stalwart, his scowl barely concealed beneath a flowing white beard. While the Empress's royal guard were permitted retirement after 20 years service, like how Roman soldiers were permitted retirement after 25 years service, for 300, as long as the previous dynasty and this dynasty put together, each had only relinquished their holy blade at the behest of Gemcheek Sortira. While appointments to the Holy Blades aren't for life. In practice, they are for life because people care about the weapons and people care about the institutional history that much. And Ekkin freaks out. Your Majesty, I did not. The Empress chuckled. At ease, my Knight of Helster. Ekkin nodded mechanically. He's not in control of himself. The Empress over the Norians wore a dress and shawl so blue they shamed the sky. She is a goddess. Her hair was a beehive of curls. This is actually an ancient Roman hairstyle attested to in the archaeological record. Basically, you wear a beehive, it looks very cool. Or perhaps a bed of writhing snakes. Ekkin is not okay. Two snakes, in fact, were at her hips, winding goldenly only to kiss her abdomen. This, of course, with two long twirling things at the hips and then curling at the abdomen, is supposed to make you think of like the uterus. And this is very much like meant to be Ekkin kind of mentally undressing Procne and seeing her reproductive organs inside of her. It's very gross. And then two more coiled around each of her wrists. And here we and it doesn't help that snakes are phallic. And Ekkin gulped. Ekkin is really trying not to think about this, and he's like, "Oh no, she's hot." Oh look, Procne unmused. He seems to have frozen in fear. Sir Durakos brings some refreshment. What do you? Your Grace, and Sir Durakos leaves. And then to build on this in this sexual insecurity that Ekkin has, Empress Procne immediately wraps her arms around him and is like, "Don't worry, I know you mean no harm." And she's just absolutely showing I'm the one in control here. And when Ekkin thinks suddenly he was all too aware of the sword not at his side, maybe he's thinking of a different sword, which we were establishing earlier. What is over there? What is over there? The door there, my apartments. What else? She's just like, you fucking dumb. Your apartments. And she's like, Yeah, my husband and I are estranged currently because he's grieving and I'm not. And his eldest son taken so suddenly and half-world away. But come, what do you think of this menagerie, or just this if it please you? And it is a menagerie. It is the Garden of Earthly Delights. I, how can such a thing even exist? And here we get the idea, and yeah, it does. I was told they found in the Earth. This mirror seems to be some kind of advanced artifact or piece of technology from a civilization that came long before. And, must have been really well preserved because it's a mirror. We don't know if it's magical or if it's not magical, but it is a mirror with its mirror technology far beyond whatever mirror technology is possible in this day and age in the story. As for these scrolls, I haven't a clue. I might try reading some, but Magister Volp jokingly said I should wait until I'm past 50 and not a woman. This is actually a joke about like learning mysticism, where a lot of mystical traditions, most notably the Kabbalah says you shouldn't learn it until you're past 40 and not a woman. And that's that kind of joke. And Magister Volp is like, oh yeah, you shouldn't read those scrolls until you're past 50 and not a woman. And Ekkin's like, he said that. He's like, oh, of course Magister Volp would say something like that. Because Magister Volp likes playing games with people. Magister Volp is just a troll. He's just a silly goose, and we really get the idea here. He's like, oh, you shouldn't read these scrolls until you're past 50 and not a woman. And he says, what's in them? Because I can realize, oh, she did read them. And she says, Rivel, yeah, I did read them. Oh, so and so sold me this, or we agreed on that. So this is a joke about what forms of ancient languages survive. So we actually have many, many, many ancient languages that only survive in fragments. We've got like Ugaritic, we've got cuneiform, we've got linears A and B. We only cracked Mayan like less than 100 years ago. We only cracked linear B like 50 years ago. We've still yet to crack linear A. Linear A being the language of the ancient Minoans, Linear B the language of the ancient Mycenaeans. And the thing about these ancient languages is a lot of the stuff that's preserved for us is like invoices and contract agreements. All so and so sold me this, or we agreed to that. It's all incredibly, incredibly boring stuff. Nothing truly momentous unless one can discover crime from ledgers and contracts. This being ironic because oftentimes a lot of the time crime is discovered by looking at ledgers and contracts, by white collar crime instead of, records of someone shanking someone. Not that one can't discover such a crime, but from these, I think not. And she's like, they're old scrolls filled with really, really boring shit. And the only reason people think they're interesting is because they haven't read them yet, or, maybe they actually do have something interesting in them. We just aren't looking properly. Again, begin reaching out the scrolls, and after Procne was saying, "Oh yeah, no, those scrolls I read those scrolls, they're boring." She says, "Don't read those scrolls." And Ekkin's like, why not? I thought you said they weren't interesting. But no, it's like, Shabbat like, yeah, it doesn't matter. And I was like, oh, you're there. And then Punky's just like, no, don't read them. So maybe Prockney was lying this whole time, and there is something very interesting in them. Who knows? We'll see. And Ekken's like, why not? Why not? And then Prockney says, our refreshments are here. So Prockney's really just pulling his leg. Behind them, Sir Durkos returned, flanked by two serving women carrying bronze platters. The Queen of Green Nabia is more than generous with her gifts, Party Adon said as the women placed their charges on the table. Come, try this. Clay cup, warmed to the touch, so it was being heated. Inside steamed a dark, viscous fluid. I'm all right, thank you. I can either thinks it's poisoned or he thinks it's going to taste bad. And she says, oh no, I insist. And she has her own cup. They say it's made from some sort of bean. So this is a dark, viscous liquid that is bitter and tastes like soil and is has this top that it's coffee. Prockney is offering him a cup of coffee as some kind of exotic drink. I can raise the cup to his lip, it's hot and bitter with dregs like burnt soil. I can finish one sip, then another. And they say my son had a poison. Ekin was thinking the drink was poisoned. Procne forces him to drink, and then she says, "Oh yeah, my son died of poison," and he nearly spits his drink out because he is incredibly paranoid, and Procne really is just making him as uncomfortable as possible. It's incredibly funny, and she says, "Too bitter," and like, what do you can't handle a little coffee? And he's like, maybe. Can it be had with honey or milk?" And Ekkin is essentially asking, "Can I turn this coffee into a latte?" It's very funny. And this reference to something else, of course, but Ekin tries coffee and he's like, "Can you try it with sweeteners, milk or honey?" And then plentifulness of milk and honey, that's an Old Testament reference. And Empress is like, "Oh, how degenerate to add sweeteners to your coffee." Though perhaps this luxury is decadent enough while the rabble eats oats for the rest of the animals. Oats are this curious thing in ancient literature where they are animal feed as well as people feed. However, when they're eaten by the rich, they're this like cool health food. And when they're eaten, or like this sort of like, this rustic health food, but when they're eaten by the poor, they're poor schmuck stuff. It's very hypocritical. And so she offers him a plate of olives, cheese, and honeycomb, each glistening in the afternoon sun, the garden of earthly delights. And we have olive, cheese, and honeycomb, gold, green, white, sort of like this feta kind of cheese. How about then? You wouldn't say no to a bit of degeneracy. She is enticing him with glistening food. Ekkin's breath drew short. He's very clearly thinking of something else. Staring into her flint gray eyes, he reached for a cut of honeycomb, which is ribbed. It was warm and sticky against his fingers, and some lingered there as he put the thing in his mouth, began to chew. And then Procne asks, "Are you enjoying yourself?" This is incredibly sexualized. And then Ekkin is, his heart is throbbing, which, good for him. Greatly, Your Highness. Oh, please, call me Procne. Ekkin's not okay. And she's sneering a little. He thinks she's sneering. And he's like, "Oh, what am I doing here?" The marches, the prisoners, the prisoners in the pit, the jars of smashed olives and the dreams, so jars of smashed olives and dreams as the city burned. That the dreams of the Navarines were held in jars alongside the olives, the symbol of their city, and they both got smashed. Ekkin 1 was says the enemy's wine jugs, will smash them and drink. And then Ekkin is like, "Oh, no, how did I get?" And he thinks it didn't happen like that though. It was a small sack, which is pure cope. And they could have prevented it had they just opened the gates. People like that, they probably deserved it. So, Ekkin is saying Ekkin is falling back into his preconceived notions in order to make himself feel less uncomfortable. And he's saying specifically about this hack, it didn't happen like that. And if it did happen, it didn't happen. And if it did happen, it wasn't like that. And if it was like that, it doesn't matter because they deserved it. Dear God. Ekkin is not okay. And he wasn't sure that even though Ekkin is repeating this like very genocidal rhetoric, he isn't sure. There is the chance for improvement with him. And now we continue on to the games. Will you compete on the morrows? Songbird like, "No, she's a siren. I chose not to. I disliked her tournaments. Besides, competing for gold and titles does not behoove one of my station." Ekkin instead gambles. And Procne says that hasn't stopped Lord Knox. He has no need for an extra lordship, has joined the list for mounted duels all the same. Now, we don't really know much about Lord Knox at this point. We know he's got a big ass sword. We know he kills people. We know he is incredibly loyal to Tycho Otho. So it really seems that, and we also know that he apparently has no need for extra lordships or titles. So it seems the only reason Lord Knox is here is because he really likes to fight, or he really is really hoping to kill someone. And I'm not Lord Knox, my reputation only flounders, so I so invest in myself. And Ekkin's like, "Yeah, I'm actually physically unimpressive." And Procne says, "You don't know that. The gods already favor you because, Ekkin was raised in a wealthy family, and where gods neglect, we act." Of course, Procne saying this is putting her on the same level as a god. And, that comparison has been very strong in this chapter, but we're going to build on it further. Adding your name to the was be no compulsion or V2 plays Silver Knox's victory. because, Procne says, I know the person who's in charge of the lists, we could add you, be corrupt. But if Ekkin got added and if the games were staged for Ekkin to win his duels, he would eventually have to fight Nox one way or another, and he would lose, both because he's physically unimpressive, but also because Ekkin has put money on Nox, because everyone puts money on Nox, except for Bruno, apparently. Or Valerius, if we win. Who is he sponsoring? Who is the person Valerius is sponsoring to win the mounted duels and win the lordship? We don't know. I would lose, you say. And yet there are ways to improve man's abilities. This, you might be thinking of some kind of a performance-enhancing drug, but also a man's abilities is also incredibly sexual in connotation. Suitor-tourism advantages many would take given your position. And this is the sticking point of the chapter. Because why fight honestly if you know everyone else is fighting dishonestly when you want to also fight dishonestly to get in to level the playing field? And specifically having this paired in with ambition. This is the game of politics. Why stay honest when everyone else is not staying honest, or if you think everyone else is being honest? And Ekkin is just like, you are calling me weak, you're calling me unambitious, why have you brought me here, woman? Ekkin's bigotry slips through. And he's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have said that. And she's like, well, yeah, well, no, you really shouldn't have. You messed up. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak truthfully. And she says, okay, just speak to me truthfully. The Katar in your company, Erica, I hear she's called who, she, you. And of course, Procne knows the answer to this. Ekkin has a crush on Erica and doesn't know how to deal with it. And Ekkin confirms that. Ekkin whispers things to himself at night. He does not know how to have Erga because how does he approach her about this matter? And he's hoping things work out and doesn't know how because Ekkin is a truly, truly unimpressive, truly kind of person. He says, I rescued her from death, but that doesn't make her obliged to do anything. She's a friend, even if a wind worshiper. I haven't the heart to rid myself of her yet. So Ekkin is we know that Ekkin has a bigotry against people of other religions. However, this is him putting on display, and it feels very performative. His words were clumsy. He doesn't really, really hold it against her that much, but he's pretending that he does and that she should be converted to the one true faith. And in lieu of that, he should just get rid of her. And Procne's like, you're putting too much worth in that. And then she says something else which is of importance. The Karatari are powerful people, resourceful and strong, as in powerful, resourceful, and strong makes them sound like good fighters. Proven mercenaries, good fighters. Why else do you think we renamed their lands, burned their texts and relics, and scattered the children to the winds? aka ethnic cleansing. We suppress them as to not invite challenge to our rule. The Karatari are a possibly small, possibly large ethnic group who are specifically persecuted in order to stop them from developing a national consciousness. And Ekkin says, yeah, I admire her because she has spirit despite being oppressed. A shame she devotes it to war. War, horrid war. This is actually a like a Latin saying, bella horrida bella. And the fact that Procne is quoting here gives the impression that the Empire in Noria part of their culture is a glorification of war, while at the same time paying lip service to the idea that war is actually a bad thing. So and then this results in a very striking moral contradiction where both Ekkin and Procne are paying lip service to. Neither of them really think it, but both of them are saying, "Oh yeah, war is so horrible, but you should totally not do war. Oh, that's so bad." But they literally were just fighting a war of conquest against Green Navria. So she may yet be turned to another cause, maybe even that something they call religion. And this is Ekkin, whereas Ekkin was being performatively bigoted up here, now he's being actually bigoted. It's not the fact that she's a wind worshiper, it's the fact that that her religion isn't real. And then Procne says, ah yes, their religion, superstitious nonsense. Our religion, based in red pills, very much meant to be like that. In fact, based in red. But this in fact is a common refrain in the ancient Mediterranean that other religions, other cultures, stupid. Our idiosyncratic stuff, incredibly smart, incredibly logically consistent. And Ekkin's like, what are you saying? And Progny's like, you don't get it, do you? The gods aren't real, and if they are real, they don't give a shit about us. The temple's power comes from our belief in it. Power resides where men believe it resides. As for their miracles, I know better than to ask. So apparently the temple has some kind of special ability, and so does the Inquisition. We've heard some things about that in the past, but we need more of that in the future. Their strength comes not from their mission, but because they reinforce the temple through us. The temple had the Inquisition and their persecution of whatever violates the peace of the gods. Their power comes not from their mission, but actually because they reinforce the temple's rule, and the temple reinforces the political structure. So the Inquisition has power as being arms of the state, and not actually on some kind of religious crusade. And Ekkin's like, that's not how the game is played. We were supposed to be paying lip service to these ideas that are the foundation of our empire, and here you're throwing it all away. He's like, well, what's going on? Why are you telling me this? And Pogny's like, dude, I brought you here because I need someone to, like, speak things true. And you've been failing each of my tests. I asked you what you thought about the woman you're interested in, and I asked you your thoughts about religion. I gave you food which you thought was poisoned, and and I've been making sexual advances on you this entire freaking meeting. And you're asking me why is very clearly why. And Prodigy's like, I want you to work for me, man. Like, this isn't hard. So, let's do the final test. Because, I can really. What has Ekin demonstrated this chapter? Ekin has demonstrated that he's predictable, that he is led by his emotions, and that he responds to stimuli incredibly, incredibly predictably again. So the thing Ekin is saying is that he makes a really good follower. He's someone who Prockney can push his buttons really, really easily and get him to do what she wants. And that's exactly what's happening. And now we get to actually my favorite part of the chapter, which wasn't any of that. That was great, but this is the good shit. They have a board game called Strategos, the Game of Kings. It's very much meant to be chess, which is the less brutal cousin of political intrigue. Its essence was war only waged on a tiled board rather than a battlefield. The one before Ekkin was marble, black and gold, which makes us think of the thing from the prologue. We'll get to it. 2 chapters from now, so next chapter is Lucian 5. The chapter after that is Iroh 6. Then we're finally gonna get an explanation of what the hell happened in the prologue. And gold lasts in the shape of the known world. The battlefield is the world, which makes us think of the prologue again. At sight he grew cold, realizing what he had agreed to. They said it took 1,000 nights to master the game, and at her age, Procnadon undoubtedly had thousands. And she spent a long time working on that. It's like I wanted to be like had thousands, but had thousands works. How many points? And we learned that there are several different pieces. There are soldier, commander, scout, knight, archer, catapult, magistrate, castle, king. And you play it, and it seems that each piece is worth a certain number of points, and you build an army that adds up to that number of points, and then you arrange the army, and then you fight, and you try to capture the opponent's king. So, on a macro scale, a this is kind of like a mix of Tai Shogi and like a game of Warhammer. Tai Shogi, so there's chess, which is played on 8x8 board. There's shogi, which is like Japanese chess, which is played on a 9x9 board. And then there are bigger versions of shogi, like Tai Shogi, which I believe is on a 15x15 board. And there's like 30 pieces on each side or something like that. And then there was a lost form of Tai Shogi called Taityogo Shogi, I believe, which is played on a 25x25 board and had like over 100 pieces on each side, and it was lost for several centuries. So, 100 as is custom, although some people apparently tried to win with fewer points than their opponent. No, that's quite all right. I'd still win. What's that one? The spy, and it can kill at a distance, play the assassin, or bring one of your pieces back from the dead, play the mage. Horribly imbalanced, as I know, as is war. Ekkin is paying lip service again. My dear commander, aren't playing lip service anymore. It's also horribly unrealistic. Never have forces so equal met on a field or on a field so plain. It is some outside text, but Ekkin is really playing the role. It's like, yes, I can play the aristocratic game of quoting random shit at you, and this idea that chess is not a good representation of war, or even strategos is not a good representation of war, because we get to choose our armies, we get to choose our battlefields, we get to choose, we're fighting a side of equal power overall. It's just not realistic. And then Prockney's like, no, it's not, but choose as you will, O God of War. Behind the curtain, Ekkin began choosing his pieces, and Ekkin second guesses himself and keeps on trying to put it again different armies and keeps on failing and eventually defaults to hammer and anvil. But he has no castles, no super defensive pieces. And Prockney also has a fully mobile force, but her force is to do one thing, crush, which is the how hammer and anvil works in like a military setting is you essentially do a pincer movement, or you have the anvil keep the opponent steady and the hammer crushes from the other side. However, a well armored, slow moving, not easily flankable horse doesn't really work well with hammer and anvil. In fact, that's what you usually want to be the hammer. The classic example of hammer and anvil in ancient warfare was Alexander the Great, where he used phalanxes with phalanx spearmen as the anvil and cavalry as the hammer. So they go forward, and um, Prockney Prockney makes him lose a commander to a stray catapult. And here we learn another rule of the game, which is seems the game is played on a grid. However, going diagonally is worth more movement, so catapults fire longer in straight lines. It lost only a minor piece, the Empress was practically unscathed. The next skirmishes went better, but as the game progressed, Ekin found himself increasingly fearing the Empress's siege and their slow advance across the field. Ekin has spies in this game, but he actually doesn't use them, so Ekin doesn't really know. Your attacks are sound, but you only play in the moment. What do you mean? Novices win by annihilation, experts let the court survive and trap the king within so they may inherit. This might be important later for the Lucian plotline. Who knows? I am familiar, as is from the plan and two moves ahead, only two. How then will we see the future? The future? What do you mean? And then Parkney essentially says that like in a game of chess, where you play out future permutations of moves out in your mind, and then choose which of those permutations leads you to the best possible outcome. That is how she views life. That she views life like a game of chess or like a game of strategos, where she's choosing between the different permutations and choosing to move like a boat down a river, or rather a canoe, because a canoe, however, is a Native American word. I want to use a river paddler to go to the desired end. And that essentially, for all the choices she didn't choose, there are 1,000 parallel universe Prockneys who don't like the world they're in, and they are all guiding her hands as some kind of hive mind. So Prockney arrives at the correct future she wants, which is this incredibly jaded way of looking at reality, where essentially you're saying, I'm not in control of my actions, or if I am, I'm simply trying to arrive at the future which is most preferable for me. And Ekin, of course, realizes you're not talking about Strategas, and she's like, am I? And he says, if you're concerned with arriving at the best future, where does that leave the rest of us? Then we'd be a little more than animals. And he says, no, not animals, prisoners. So, yes, if you play life like a chess game, we are simply weighing the permutations of different moves and simply trying to arrive at the best possible future for you, you are essentially in a time loop where you're in the final iteration of the loop always. And if you're in a time loop and everyone else is just like code, their free will does not matter. So Eichen is in fact pointing out that this idea of viewing life as a time loop, viewing life as time travel, viewing life as chess means you aren't valuing the lives of the people around you because you're simply trying to arrive at the best possible future for you. In that he says, to me, my life are my own, I see and act as I will, that I'm acting my own free will, but you see me as simply a piece on the board, that you are simply moving, and that the things I feel that are real to me aren't real to you. And in fact, the idea of calling images what you would call shadows is a reference to the allegory of the cave by Plato, and the idea of the allegory of the cave is that the enlightened see what is actually free will, what actually is the real reality, while everyone else are just playing it in their illusions. So, little more than an animal indeed, without a will of my own, may I respond to light and heat and food, like an animal, that yeah, you would sacrifice my agency for your own gain. And she says, don't be bitter. Of course, it's true, but I live and think I cannot say the same thing about you. This is a philosophical problem called the sentience problem, where we still don't know if other people, we don't know if all of us have actual like souls and free will and sentience, or if one of us, not, or one of us, me, you, the person listening to this is the one who actually has the free will, and all of the rest of us are automatons. Like I can say that I have free will, but you'd say the same about yourself, which is what Prockney's saying. You thought that go the only carry or you for me for there, but yes, the metaphor is quite apt. She's patting herself on the back. Going through life caring only about the next meal, unawares their shepherd also has a knife. This idea of shepherding will come back in future chapters, and specifically the idea of going through life like an animal, only caring about the next meal, is a Sallust quote. Yet in a state, being an animal, one seems innocent. And Progney's like, oh yeah, it'd be great because, innocent people, people who are just following orders or just following their urges, can't be held responsible for their actions, which is not true, but and the fact that's not true really should call into question Prockney's entire philosophy. Prockney really is presenting Ekkin with this alternative view of how reality works, and it's really, really messed up. One could slay 100 prisoners for 100 days and still be innocent if you're just following orders, which is not true. Whether it be man, the world's logic, or the gods themselves, pieces on the board if you would, and how could there be anything but innocent? But this is ironic because, from Ekkin and Progney's perspective, the pieces on the board are innocent. They're just pieces. They have no free will, but from the perspective of the pieces, they have free will. This is a whole thing about free will, chess, time travel, things like that. It's a bunch of threads interlocking with each other. And the idea and the main question is like, where does our agency come from? Does our agency come from us, from our environment, or is it internal? And how do we therefore choose what to do with our lives? And you see, and Ekkin's like, okay, this is actually your personal philosophy. And Prockney says, I'm not telling you. And Ekkin, is sexist. Ekkin, do you actually see the world like this? Prockney, I'm not telling you. Ekkin, sexism. And he says it's not that simple because if people are just following orders, then actually the entire world is broken. But the soldiers still chose to obey. How can they be innocent if they themselves chose and would be pushed by a divine hand? And of course, the idea of slaying prisoners makes us think of Ekkin 5. But so he's saying if everything has a chain of causality, how do we account for free will? Or like, if everything has a chain of causality, everyone's innocent, but also no one's innocent because you are simply in the role that it was assigned for you, but you are still doing it. And Prockney says it disappears in the mist of free will. That we have that because we have free will, or at least the illusion of free will, our choices actually do matter, but realistically they don't matter because we're just the agents of outside forces. And this idea of anyone who signs cause from logic alone exists in a state of sin. This actually is a riff on a von Neumann quote, which is anyone who like tries to create randomness from arithmetic means exists in a state of sin. That anyone who tries to logic out the world exists in a state of sin, which is very ironic because all of this is also commentary on Platonism, and Platonism tries to logic out the world from first principles. Without such dice, the soldier does as he is told, but with them he may still act as he should, but the shadow of the agency is preserved. That we see that he is rolling dice and then doing what the dice roll says. He thinks that the what we see as the shadow on the wall is an actual figure. Were those dice rare, for we would command others as perfectly as these pieces, and as we truly know what's best for them. So Procny's saying most people are animals, except they're animals which do things based off RNG gods. And with this problem of the RNG, they aren't in control of their lives, and we would know better. Of course, and we should know what's best for them, which is why we should rule them. And this is, besides for being messed up on so many different levels, this is also just wrong because Procne is also human. This logic doesn't work because she's as susceptible to these dice as everyone else. And she captures another soldier, then Spine hands them Decken. But the soldier are mere pieces. What stopped us from hiring each of the Carrot companies after we bested them? Your moves. If it's all just trying to arrive at the best future, if it's all just games, if it's all just dealing with non-sentient people, why not play as mercenarily as possible? And Procky's like, oh, I would have, but my husband is stupid. And she insults her husband, and he's like, but you seem satisfied in negotiations. And she's like, yeah, because you're one of the elect. You have the ability to change history, or rather, put history on the right path. Isn't that such an honor, Ekkin? But if free will is an illusion, if Ekkin is just obeying the dice rolls and obeying the behest of those of greater power than him, it doesn't matter that he's in the position that he was, but it does. So Progne really does she believe in all this? Who knows? But Ekkin, of course, is just feeling really bad about himself. And he says, "Do you think he was lying?" Corpse hands, I mean Isilon. And Procne says, "Doesn't freaking matter. Like, sure, he might have been lying, but also doesn't matter. I don't see why not. We need to, but if it, either way, he needs to show up again for the thing he said to matter." And then she's like, "Oh, and he might show up, but I think that's does not answer whether it's likely or not." Procne's playing with him. And she says, actually, but I do care about my son. But of course, Procne's had um yeah, four sons, and the only two left are Tychon the Second and Edmund. And she only considers Edmund really her own child. And then she's like, ah, you're dead. And he's like, why? And she's like, the world's all like it's all remember how I said it's like all trying to arrive at the best future? Well, I'm doing that, and you are locked into a doomed timeline, which is an utterly horrific feeling. She says there's no way you can win if you play, even if you play optimally, you still lose. With this character's death, the thread of prophecy is severed. Restore a save game or persist in the doom, restore the weave of fate, or persist in the doom world you've created. The idea that we're in a doomed timeline, a timeline where nothing can be done to better our situation is really, really horrific. Imagine like getting to the end of Harry Potter and Neville isn't there to kill Nagini and they lose. And then when they're losing, they realize, oh, Neville died in book five, so we don't have what it takes to kill Voldemort. Guess we just lose. That's really horrific. And Ekkin is like, yeah, what's the point? I'm in a doomed timeline. How do I get out of this? And you look like someone stole your first kiss, and he's just like, how could I won? And then she says, you were led by your pieces, they by their whims, and if I recall, you squandered a piece early. You didn't realize, but you lost even before at the very beginning of the game, and you might have even lost before the game, way before. And Ekin thinks, how long ago did I lose? Was it when he rescued Erga? Was it when he rescued Isilon? Was it when he was a foundling instead of whoever his actual parents are, whoever they are? Or was it when his father's first wife died? And everything has been downhill since then. And she's like, you can't win. But actually, there's one way. And Ekken's like, tell me, give me salvation, goddess. Bring me out of the Garden of Earthly Delights. Bring me back into this world of reality. And she hands him the spy. And it all comes together. Procne wants Ekin to work as her informant because she thinks she knows something's coming and she wants him on her team. And that's the end of the chapter. That's the end of Ekkin 6. Next time we are going to go over Lucian 5, which is Lucian 5 is going to be really interesting. It is the longest chapter so far. But a lot of stuff needs to happen in Illusion 5, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Bye. Take care of yourselves.